Very good. Well, very good. Well, thanks for letting me come out and present my business to you guys. This is honestly probably my first presentation, so if it sucks, you know who to blame. So, me. So right off the bat, I'm just going to kind of go through what it is that I'm going to cover in this quick presentation. The first thing is what is the problem that we discovered in our business, and how is it that we came about discovering that problem? And then we're going to go into, what is an intelligent sensor network? What is it that we've actually created? And then talk a little bit about how we've had to pivot and change our business up a little bit to really make it work with the market. And then, of course, what that solution is. And the last thing would be, how do we make money? And how do we turn this into a real business? And of course, you guys will have a chance to ask some questions. So jumping right into it, what is one of the biggest problems that every business that has product faces? And it's consistent, and that, of course, is inventory management. Why is it such a challenge? Why is it so difficult for businesses to manage inventory? Well, it's a moving target, and it's difficult to have a consistent view on what you have. It's a capital-intensive part of your business, obviously. Inventory, for a company that owns product, makes up the majority of their capital. So that can lead to emotional decisions, and if the data isn't accurate, if the data is not there to support it, it can lead to some really bad things. Obviously, overstocking and understocking. We all know what can happen if we overstock or understock. It can literally lead to financial ruin for a business. So basically, up till this point, there has been a primary technology that most businesses have used, and that is barcode technology. If you guys have ever worked retail and had to suffer through an inventory audit like I have, they typically do them twice a year. That's kind of standard for the industry. And they'll go through and they'll do these audits. So let's talk about the difference between what barcode is versus what RFID is, and then we'll get into our intelligent sensor network. So barcodes, as you all know, it is a one-dimensional symbology of a number or an ID or something. So the barcode reader, an optical reader, actually has to see the barcode to read it, so it's a slow process. Also, barcodes are not serialized typically. They only identify the size and style of the product. So it's very difficult when you're actually doing an audit to know if you have scanned one item twice or if you have omitted one altogether. So it's really difficult to know. So the difference then, of course, with RFID reads hundreds of items per second. It doesn't need line of sight. And actually, I'm going to pass it out really quick. I'm just going to pass out the boss. This is a gimmick, but it works really well. Just go ahead and pass this out. Take a business card. On the back of the business card, I've included an RFID inlay. So the RFID actually uses a small silicone chip. It's the size of a grain of rice, and an antenna. It's typically copper or aluminum. And it allows these tags to be read hundreds per second. It does not need line of sight like a barcode does. So you can read product inside of boxes. Everything is serialized, so the products can't be read twice. It can be seen more than one time, but it's always filtered out. So ultimately, it goes down to the each level. So let's talk about what an intelligent sensor network is. So essentially, we're using RFID as the endpoint to gather data, and these tags are typically they typically come on a standard roll, just like your normal barcode, half-cent barcode tag. The only difference is that you can see inside of the label has that small silicone chip that's called the inlay. And so they go through a printer, standard printer, either direct thermal or transfer, and at that point they actually encode a value into this chip, and that's how it's read. So it's read by these various types of readers. I've got some pictures of some readers here, handheld readers, as well as a fixed reader. So jumping into kind of what the problem is, how big the problem is. I found this interesting quote, and I thought it was worth putting up. It basically says that 27% of businesses out there plan on adding some type of inventory management features to their business set, and most of them feel like that there's a real hole there. But 36% say the interoperability is the most important factor. And I tend to agree with them. There's so many different software systems out there, but many of them don't work together. One glaring example of this is the e-commerce world. You can see what is happening with e-commerce business. In 2011, I believe it went from 308.6 million all the way up to this year. We're at 554.81 million. So we can see the e-commerce, is blowing up. So in terms of what our solution does, we built this intelligent sensor network. Initially, we built it to manage large businesses, and then we saw that the e-commerce world and many of these other smaller platforms that supported the app marketplace were a great place to go into. So we built an application which allows us to integrate with companies like, our first one is BigCommerce. It allows us to allow BigCommerce vendors to utilize all the feature sets that we have within our RFID application. So they're able to generate inventory audits of their store. If they had 20,000 pieces, it would take them about 15 minutes to read all of their inventory, 99% accurate. They're able to sync that data back over to their BigCommerce inventory. They're able to pull the orders from the BigCommerce and then verify them by simply scanning the outside of the box to verify the contents. Then, of course, since it's a private network, we're able to print directly through that application as well. And then lastly, you can use the technology to actually locate products as well. So you're missing something, you have it in your store, you can use it as a Geiger counter. It will guide you directly to the product that you're looking for. So some of the other things we're planning on adding to the integration application that we already have on our main application is things like receiving. So we can actually tell you, say you purchase product from China, from 3 suppliers. We generate the tags that go on those products, and as that product comes into your distribution center, we can tell you exactly how much of that product has been received, percentage-wise, immediately. So how do we make money? How do we turn this into a real business? Obviously, that's a constant struggle, but we have basically 3 avenues. We have the hardware, which for a small business like a BigCommerce, like an e-commerce seller, they can get into it as little as about $3,600 for all the hardware needed. And then we have the SaaS monthly membership. We've been charging about $299 a month for these smaller businesses. And then lastly, they have the consumables, so ribbons and tags. So we have been working with BigCommerce, and we have plans we actually have several calls set up with other e-commerce platforms to work with them through their affiliate programs as well. So yeah, that's basically it. So I don't know if I took up way too little of time. Or...
You're great.
Okay, great. Questions?
Right. Questions? If you can poke holes in this.
Yes.
Do you have any example of clients that you've worked with?
Yeah, great question. So, the history of the business is that I started out working and had a logistics business, and that's how I uncovered the problems of inventory management. So, initial clients were actually from the Costco and Sam's Club Roadshow programs. We moved, after that we moved into e-commerce and point of sale. So, some of our first clients were like Jennifer Adams. We have Heirloom Clothing here locally in Linden. We've got Modern Vintage Boutique, which is an online seller in Draper. And then we actually pivoted again and started working with direct sales companies, so some of the larger ones. One of our customers is a company called LuLaRoe. They sell women's clothing, so we were able to manage about 40 million pieces at one of their distribution centers, reading the product with forklift readers, so they can read, each forklift can read about 1 million products an hour, and they just drive down the aisles and just picks up all the products. So.
Who are your competitors?
Great question. In terms of large competitors, there are a number of players out in the market. I would say Impinj is probably one of the most well-known. They're the first RFID company to go public, a pure play. There are There's a lot of smaller players out in the market as well, but really no one we have seen outside of a company called Stocked Perfect that has tried to integrate into these e-commerce and point of sale platforms. So.
Yeah, my question actually was, you're working with Domo and some of these other companies. Okay, it came from Supernatural, so they've got a system that's fairly similar that runs like off of Cisco. Basically, anytime something's pulled or something needs done, like it's a warehouse of 50,000 square feet, but 10 guys run it. Similar type idea with this, right?
It could be. It could be barcode if it's just scanning like a case or like a location bin or something like that. That's a good question. I'd have to look into that.
Logistically, from the person with the warehouse, what's the difference that they'll have to go through in terms of tagging everything with these RFID badges versus what they are already doing? Is it a huge time suck for them to get that implemented, or is it fairly streamlined? And then also, I remember from years back watching a TV show about how doctors would always leave medical instruments inside of people, and they started using QR codes to scan in, scan out all of the instruments and things like that. Is that a space that you've looked into getting in terms of not only inventory management, but loss management?
Great questions, thanks. Yeah, both of those are great questions. So right off the bat, in terms of, you have a distribution center, it's not tagged with RFID tags, it's tagged with barcode tags. Obviously, there is a little bit of an implementation process. The product that comes in, so most companies obviously either have suppliers or manufacturers. All we're doing is we're intercepting when the tag is placed on the product, and it's called Service Bureau. They actually print and encode these tags, and then they would send it to the factories to be placed in lieu of the existing tags that they've been using. So from an initial standpoint, there is definitely a pain point where you have to go through and you've got to tag all of the existing product that's in the distribution center. But as new product comes in, it should be tagged, and that's typically the process we follow. Is
there a big cost difference there?
Good question. So an RFID inlay, I should have probably brought this slide, but in 2001, a guy did a report on the cost of RFID tags. This was in 2002, the report was completed. And the cost of an RFID inlay was $1.15. In 2004, when Walmart started pushing in and trying to use RFID, the cost was like 50 cents, just under 50. My smallest customers now pay 10 cents and the direct per tag. And the price drops down into the 6-cent range if you're dealing with huge volumes, and even a little bit lower. So in terms of use in things like medical devices, funny you mentioned my youngest brother is actually an oral surgeon, and he's looked into trying to do it with the teeth that they put in, so that, because they're very expensive apparently, and they have to trace them and be able to verify that it was the correct one that was put in, things like that. So yeah, there's a lot of applications. I also heard about a company in Midwest that's actually chipping their employees, and I don't know how ethical that is, but ultimately you can pay for your soda at the soda machine without bringing your card, so there's an advantage there. So.
Any other questions?
I came a little late, but the latest stories that I hear are these RFIDs that are inserted into the hand, and then employees go in, management, and they basically can go throughout the whole building with inserts. Is that what you guys are doing?
No, we're going to try to stay away from anything that's too question. But really, our focus is on inventory management, asset management, and really, it's primarily on these areas of the market that have not been touched at all. If you go and do a search on any one of these major platforms and look, search RFID, you're not going to find any. If you look for accounting solutions or supply chain or anything, you're going to find hundreds. So I think that there's still a huge opportunity, for the technology.
So it seems like it's superior to barcodes in a lot of ways. What are the biggest obstacles that you see when you're trying to get a new client or onboard a new company or something like that?
That's a great question. I would say probably one of the biggest challenges is that it's an educational sale. A lot of times, you can't really approach a person and say, have you heard of RFID? Because most people are going to say, well, yeah, sure I have. But most people aren't familiar with it, or if it will actually work for their products. So I would say, number one, you have to sell them on that the technology, first of all, exists. And then secondly, you have to sell them on the fact that you're the right answer to that technology challenge. So in a way, it's difficult if a person doesn't really know that something like this is even out there. It becomes more difficult to actually make a sale, I find. So most of my business actually comes from referrals, and that's actually why my ask is really, I actually don't work with Domo or Fishbowl, but they're kind of perfect because they both support marketplaces, and yeah.
It seems to me one of the biggest benefits would be that people would have real-time data on their inventory that would allow them to do the right purchases. Is that right?
Right. I would say probably that ability to have, really it's like an internal audit. I mean, typically you're getting 2 audits per year of your inventory, and really, day 2 after the audit's completed, that inventory is getting off, more and more progressively each day. So with RFID, you are literally tracking every item, by the serial number daily. And so, yeah, absolutely. What it ultimately can amount to is much thinner stocks. People will make a lot less emotional buying decisions about their inventory because they can see what's actually moving. Frees up space, it frees up capital. Nobody wants to purchase too much of a product. Of course, nobody wants to purchase too little of it because they want to meet the demand. So this is a great way to forecast. We're not really designed to be a standalone platform. We're really to supplement other platforms and really feed them accurate, up-to-date inventory data. So,
All right, any more questions? All right, last question. What can we as 1 Million Cups community do for you?
well, I'm just really looking for anybody that has any good referrals, any inroads to probably either of these 2 companies because they're local and they both support marketplaces where we could deploy our software into and help their customer bases out. But of course, any referrals at all are always welcome. So I guess that's what I'm here for.
So you're saying these 2 you do not have inroads to?
No. I've talked to Fishbowl, and I've talked to Domo, to some of the sales people and stuff over there, but I haven't really talked to anybody that's got me anywhere. So
I got a connection.
oh, nice. Okay.
We'll talk.
Cool.
I need to catch up with you.
Right.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.